Let's do this. So thank you all for joining us today. Uh, I'm joined here with Jamie from Not So Hospitable, and we're going to be speaking today about sexual harassment and hospitality. And this is for you, the employees, your rights at work. We are actually doing another webinar later this afternoon for small businesses in hospitality, but this session will be focused on you and your rights at work. So before I hope that you can all see and hear me okay. Please feel free to pop something in the chat if you can't. But look, very first of all, I would like to acknowledge that the land we meet on today, virtually and in person, is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge that the Kaurna people are the custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. So today, like I said, we're going to be talking about your rights at work, and specifically your rights at work as a hospitality worker, and around your right to be safe in a workplace free from sexual harassment. So I would just like to give a content warning that we will be speaking about sexual harassment at work and the work that both the Working Women's Centre and Not So Hospitable have been doing in this space. So there will be discussion on sexual harassment and sexual violence in the workplace. So please feel free to step out of the session or look after yourself however you need. If this recording will be available afterwards if you did just want to pop out and rejoin later. But today we're going to be going through some current conversations in the workplace that have been going on in society, and more recently, just getting these conversations starting about what's happening in hospitality specifically. We're going to be going through the legal definitions of what sexual harassment is and what your rights are. We're going to go through some new laws that are coming in that are going to increase the obligations of your employers to keep you safe at work. And we're going to discuss a bit about what are those kind of normalised behaviours at work that people do all the time and don't really think about, but actually are inappropriate and you shouldn't have to put up with them. So we'll go through in a bit more depth around what your legal options are if you have been sexually harassed and you decide that you want to make a formal complaint. And finally, we're going to chat about how do you create change at work when you're a worker? How do you influence your workplace and your bosses to make some positive changes in your workplace? And where can you go? What are your next steps in getting involved in a movement or joining? So I will be moving through those topics today. Firstly, I'd just like to say a bit about myself and who I am and who we are here at the Working Women's Centre. So the Working Women's Centre, we've been going since 1979. We're a free and confidential service to women and vulnerable workers who aren't part of a union. So predominantly we do have women as clients, but we are open to vulnerable workers of all genders. So we're funded by the state and federal governments and smaller grants here and there from unions and grants. I'm a lawyer here. There's 3 other lawyers here as well. So the bulk of our work is providing legal advice on workplace issues like wage theft, unfair dismissals, discrimination, like both sex discrimination, disability and racial discrimination, as well as, of course, sexual harassment. We do also have an advocacy arm that seeks to try and resolve systemic issues we see that affect women and vulnerable workers in our workplace systems through research, lobbying and project work. And we also have an education arm, and I guess that's a bit of part of what we're doing here today. We give free community webinars and legal education to both community organisations, and we also do fee-for-service training for businesses who want to learn more about their workplace rights and improve their policies and treatment of their workers. So yeah, today we're talking about sexual harassment, and obviously, we've been dealing with this for a very long time, but recently our work in this area has really come to the fore. We actually do have currently a strategic focus to working to eliminate sexual harassment, and we are prioritising giving legal advice to workers who find themselves in that situation. So we're lucky enough to have recently received some extra funding specifically for legal advice for sexual harassment cases. So this is really one of the first things we're doing to kick off that new funding and that new strategic direction around sexual harassment at work. So like I said, I'm very pleased to have you all here today. And on that note, I think I'll pass over to Jamie to tell you a bit about Not So Hospitable and her work in the
area. Yeah, my name's Jamie Bucirde, and I started the movement of Not So Hospitable. So I guess I'll just go into a little bit about what that movement is and how important that is in terms of enacting real change. Well, hopefully you can all see me. Hopefully that's a little bit better. And to start to enact some real change and really open dialect about sexual harassment in the workplace and what you can do as workers, and just talk about the real change there. So Not So Hospitable is a grassroots movement kind of highlighting the prevalence of sexual harassment, sexual assault, and like workplace bullying that fosters a toxic workplace culture within the Adelaide hospitality community specifically. My intention in creating this platform was, and still is, to gather testimonies of people's lived experiences of sexual harassment and give people a space to be able to share their stories where they're listened to in a safe and controlled environment. So over time, I really want to gauge a qualitative and quantitative understanding of these experiences of sexual harassment in the workplace that's occurring so frequently in the industry. So a little bit of background from me. I've been working in Hospo for 14 years. And as a member of the Adelaide hospitality community, I've also personally experienced sexual harassment whilst at work from a person in a position of power. I really understand its prevalence because I've seen it on such a regular basis, if not coming from myself, being harassed or assaulted, then more times I can count on both hands. I've been watching people get harassed and assaulted and hearing these lived experiences from my fellow co-workers. So I've got a really personal understanding of how prevalent this issue is. All the information that I'm collecting is being used anonymously. So I've taken out names of survivors, alleged perpetrators, venues, and that's because I really want to create the much needed research in this space that hasn't really ever been done before, especially in Adelaide. So together, this platform can eradicate the practices that enable a dangerous breeding ground of sexual harassment and sexual assault, and better protect hospitality workers across Adelaide and foster an industry that cultivates safety, respect, and accessible education. So I've been working quite closely with government bodies to talk about how we can actually start enacting legislative change, enforce mandated educations and trainings in the workplace, and make them accessible to all sectors of the hospitality industry, and hopefully eventually put enough pressure on the government so we actually get an inquiry into sexual harassment in hospitality. So data on this research it's really important. And in 2.5 months, I've received over 360 testimonies of hospitality workers and their first-hand experiences whilst at work. And the majority of this information I'm finding is that people are being assaulted or abused at work from other people in positions of power, whether that be their managers, their supervisors, the venue owners, as well as patrons. But the majority of testimonies I've been finding have been coming from their employers. So what are the current conversations in society regarding sexual harassment, whether that is positive or negative, and why is it important to have these conversations within our culture? So conversations on sexual harassment, especially within the workplace, has become more normalised over the years. Industries have had inquiries and reforms of stories have come out of sexual harassment and abuse from people in positions of power exploiting women. The Me Too movement, which started in 2006, which essentially assisted survivors of sexual violence, especially women of colour, and gained a lot of media attraction after it was revealed that Harvey Weinstein had been assaulting women for decades. So it was kind of the first instance of seeing and hearing sexual assault and harassment in the workplace being so normalised. You know, from there we've had Chanel Contos and Teach Us Consent, who gathered 6,000 testimonies of sexual harassment within New South Wales schools. And that kind of started conversations of consent, and now they've just mandated consent education across Australia from 2023. So having these conversations, you're actually seeing a direct correlation between conversations and legislative change. So Not So Hospitable has kind of done the same thing, and for the first time within Adelaide hospitality culture, we're seeing testimonies which proves how prevalent it is within hospitality. There's been media attention, there's been government attention, and now venues are actually having these conversations on their personal harassment culture and workplace prevention procedures and policies. So this is all positive, but it's also important to highlight the stigma of believing women's stories of sexual harassment that is still super prevalent. So a really important statistic that I like to kind of share with people that a lot of people don't really know is that only 3 to 5% of sexual harassment and assault allegations are false. Only 3.5%. And that's the same as any other major criminal crime. And there's this really big societal myth that women lie about sexual harassment and assault, but there actually isn't any data to back that up. And you also had a really interesting statistic, didn't you?
Yeah. So I believe it was only about was it 17% of sorry, I lost my train of thought completely there.
Sorry, I'm really throwing you under the bus by segueing over to you.
No, that's okay. No problem. I'll come back to me in a second on that one.
Essentially, it's just on the rates of people that actually report instances of sexual harassment.
Oh, that's what I remember now.
Yeah,
sorry,
no, that's good.
I'll focus
Segue.
Yeah, so that's right. So only about 17% of conduct is actually reported to a manager. That's through the Safe Work SA. So there's so much sexual harassment that goes on in workplaces that just isn't being reported even. So not only are not very many of those reports false, but there's just so much more that isn't even actually being talked about.
Just shows like such a disconnect between feeling safe to report, knowing how to report, because that's a very low number. Like 17 is not very high, so that's crazy. But yeah, coming forward, sexual harassment is still stigmatized. It's looked down on. You're commonly either considered a whistleblower or a troublemaker if you even bring up these allegations of harassment that you've experienced within hospitality. If you're brave enough to ever come forward and try to report, a lot of the time it's either brushed under the rug, your shifts are cut, you're bullied, or you're actually fired. And that's a really common theme that I found with the testimonies that I've received so far. Another really quite dangerous, toxic behaviour is that you may never be able to get a job within that hospitality group again or other groups, because Adelaide Hospital is so small and so tight-knit, and everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows everything. So that really brands you as a troublemaker, which is quite problematic if you're ever trying to come forward. Yeah, an important takeaway from this conversation of how prevalent it is within the hospitality scene is that people don't know how to report. They don't know how to follow up a report. They don't know where to go for support. And that's coming from people that have experienced harassment and assault, but it's also managers and people in positions of power that are so out of their depth that they don't know how to do or deal with these reports, and they don't have adequate training themselves. So another key takeaway from this conversation is that the behaviour is so normalised within hospo culture now that it's actually an accepted part of working in a hospo venue if you're a woman. It's kind of something you're told to put up with as a part of the job. And your experience is kind of reduced if you ever try to talk out about that not being okay, you're feeling uncomfortable. A lot of people don't even understand that their behaviour is classified as harassment and assault, and that shows me that there's a gap in education, and accessible education, and actual appropriate workplace conduct. So the good thing about seeing a gap in this is that you can start to actually fill the gap and start talking about it and start giving people access to information and trainings, which is kind of what we're doing today, which is quite amazing. Cool, next slide.
Excellent. So yeah, as Jamie was saying, there's a real range of conduct, isn't there, that that there's very obvious conduct that is very obviously to everyone considered to be sexual harassment, and then there's often some more minor things that perhaps, you know, it might not be thought of in the general population as something serious enough to be called sexual harassment. But you know, we find here as well a lot that those more so-called minor incidents really do have a really huge effect on women's lives. You know, even if it is a minor joke or offhand comment, those things build up over time and can really seriously affect a worker's personal livelihood and mental health as well. So certainly here at the centre, we're also trying to assist clients with those kind of claims to pursue legal claims, because it's just not acceptable. Did you have more research to talk about, Jamie?
Yeah. Let's talk about. Sorry, back in the picture. Let's talk about another study that came out recently. That kind of has been the first one that I've seen that highlights the prevalence of toxic behaviour within hospitality in Australia. Came out by the University of Queensland, and they found that 70% of Australian hospitality workers have either experienced sexual, verbal, or racial abuse whilst at work, and 70% is pretty high. They found that customers were the main perpetrators. However, they found that 42% of the respondents also said their managers or supervisors had abused them. Now that's quite reflected in the data that I found as well, but it's really important to see this data coming out from institutions such as the University of Queensland that can actually start being a catalyst for getting this information into the media, which it kind of has. You know, given the stigma around reporting and the lack of education about exactly what constitutes harassment or abuse, this proportion of people who have experienced abuse is likely to be a lot higher, which is quite important to kind of think about also. And we do know that women are statistically more prone to experiencing gendered violence, and the perpetrator is more likely to be male. So the researcher of the study, Dr. Richard Robertson, said the results exposed deep cultural issues in the hospitality industry with poor behaviours and practices that have been so normalised and systematic. And again, that's kind of a bit reflective of what we've been talking about, is it's so systematic. It's quite difficult to report, seek help, and actually feel protected and safe within your workplace.
Thank you, Jamie. So we might move on now to, you know, we've talked a bit about the normalised behaviours and stories that we've heard, but what is the legal definition of sexual harassment? So sexual harassment, it is a type of gendered violence. It's unwelcome conduct that's sexual in nature. It's unlawful, and it's often repeated, although it can just be one instance, one act. And it's something that disturbs, offends, intimidates, works, makes difficult and impossible in circumstances in which a reasonable person, having regard to the circumstances, would have anticipated that behaviour would cause the person to feel offended, humiliated, or intimidated. So it's unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature that is something that a reasonable person would find offensive, humiliated, or intimidated, or that that makes you feel that way, that offends, humiliates and intimidates you. It is kind of a mouthful there. So that is actually the wording in the Sex Discrimination Act as well. We've just inserted it there for your reference. So sexual harassment can include those, you know, like we were talking about, the lower level things like the offhand joke or comment, to staring, leering, or unwelcome touching. It can be unwanted invitations to go out on dates or requests for sex. And we've had a few cases here recently at the Working Women's Centre where it can be, you know, like cases where someone's continues to profess their love for their worker. Those kind of, again, it's repeated and unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature. It can be unnecessary familiarity, such as deliberately brushing up against a person, or, you know, trying to massage their shoulders or something like that. It can be around the workplace environment as well, like having pornographic posters in a locker room or in a staff room. And it can be digital, it can be in text or email, or communicating content of a sexual nature through social media or text messages. So there is really a wide range of behaviours that do constitute sexual harassment under the law. So as we're talking through this, I'm going to be talking about, what are your legal options if you have been sexually harassed at work. But I want you to remember that throughout all of this, you do have fundamental rights at work. And those fundamental rights are that you do have the right to a safe workplace, both mentally and physically. You have the right to a workplace that's equal and respectful, and that is free from sexual harassment. And it's really important to remember that you have the right to make a complaint or inquiry about your employment. So you have the right to speak up at work. I know that's really, really difficult for a lot of people, especially with something that can be quite sensitive and offensive like sexual harassment, and especially if you're in insecure work and there's that huge power imbalance between you and your employer. But it's important to know that the law is on your side, and you do have that right to complain about things at work, and the employer cannot take adverse action against you. So we'll go into that in a little bit, but I just want you to remember that. And these rights come from both work health and safety legislation, and the Sex Discrimination Acts, like I referenced before, and as well as the Fair Work Act. So we'll be chatting through a bit more about that. I also just wanted to speak a bit about, you might have heard in the media at the moment that the federal parliament is introducing new workplace laws, or trying to improve the current laws to provide extra protections for workers. So if they do pass, and there's still debate and amendments to be had, but currently the bills are trying to introduce positive duty on employers. So that means that it won't be good enough, if the bill passes, it won't be good enough for an employer just to hear a complaint and react to it and do something about it. There's actually going to be a positive duty on them to take measures to eliminate sex discrimination and sexual harassment as far as possible. So really, they'll have to be doing a lot more work to make sure that your workplace is healthy and free from those kind of factors that breed sexual harassment, and that they do have proper policies in place to protect you. So it means that if you were to file a claim, they have to show what they did to prevent it, basically. And also in the Fair Work legislation amendment, so that proposed amendment to the Fair Work Act, the Fair Work Commission is going to have a new jurisdiction to deal with sexual harassment claims, a little bit like the current general protections claims mechanisms. So it will give you another option to pursue a claim through the Fair Work Commission as well. So we'll go into a bit more detail about what those legal options are. But perhaps before we get onto that, do you have some case studies, Jamie, around what are these low level these so-called normalised behaviours, and what if that happens to work, what's the first reaction usually?
Yeah, I guess these testimonies have shown like the diverse and full breadth of sexual harassment and abuse experience in the workplace, because sexual harassment is verbal and it's physical, and as you were saying, it can be everything from unwanted text messages to social media messages or DMs, asking for unsolicited nudes, continuously asking someone out if they've said no, taking advantage of someone after work if they've been drinking. It's a wide spectrum of assault, so it's quite important to kind of know these in a contextual environment when at work, and what are kind of seen as quite normalised behaviours, but are really quite inappropriate behaviours. And as you said, it's walking across the bar and grabbing someone's waist as they walk past, making comments whilst someone bends over, at knockoffs continuously asking someone to go home with them instead of said no, or hooking up with someone at work and then talking about the intimate details to your other workers. From an employer's point of view, it's hiring only young, attractive girls. And if you're in a position of power, if you're a manager, supervisor, or a boss, it's sleeping with your staff, because there's a power dynamic that comes into play. If you are in a position of power that has the ability to control the cut shifts, manipulate an environment, there's always that power dynamic. So that's really important to talk about. And it's quite normalized, because in hospitality, the lines are quite blurred in terms of, you're friends with everyone, you're friends with your bosses. Sometimes people are around the same age. You've got the knockoff culture as well. So if you're finishing work at 2 or 3 a.m. and you're having a knockoff and winding down, because it's so late, you keep drinking and those lines get really, really blurred. So, a typical response from an employer or a manager is normally that they haven't had the adequate training on how to handle this themselves. So they're just automatically out of their depth, or they didn't even realize that sleeping, if you're a manager, sleeping with younger co-worker is quite appropriate and not necessarily the right thing to do at work. If the person being accused is the owner, or the person is in a position of power and the manager is the one taking the report, they're also put in a really compromising position, because if they act on it, maybe their jobs are also on the line. So you see this like really quite strong cycle of corruption happening that's quite hard to break. Typical outcomes, it's brushed under the rug. The person or the survivor's been bullied, the shifts are cut, as we were saying before, or they're fired. So the report isn't followed up and nothing is really done about it. Do you want me to go on to some case studies now?
Perhaps, yeah, we were speaking there about the adverse actions that can happen. So we might come back to that when I'm speaking about the general protections claims. But look, so I guess we'll move on now to look, say something has happened at work and you think it's, you have been sexually harassed. What do you do about it? And I guess while we're talking about this, I just really want to emphasize it as well, that everyone, obviously there's such a huge range of conduct and experiences of sexual harassment that people have. But remember, it does affect everyone differently, and your reaction is valid. And it often takes a really long time for people to process what's happened to them and to be in a place to even start to go to speak to someone about it. So whilst we are going to move through quite quickly, I guess, all the different kind of legal options that you can pursue, I just want you to remember that, you may need some time to process it, and that's completely normal. So yeah, as number one, your first priority is your safety and also your mental health. So if something happens to you, obviously get yourself to a safe place if you have to leave work because you feel that you're in danger. Again, just know that you're allowed to do that. You won't, if you got in trouble and got fired, that the law is on your side to protect yourself at work in that way. Obviously seek support from your family or friends, your co-workers, your GP if you need to. Once you're out of that position and you start to process it a bit, just consider what support you need around you to start to process it. I guess once you've gotten over that initial shock and reaction, and you're feeling a bit more like, well, what do I do now? You might like to see if your employer has any policies already around what to do in this kind of situation. Do you have an enterprise agreement that has like a grievance procedure? So you might like to chat to your boss about it, and if you feel comfortable, and report it to them. It's sometimes, if it's a co-worker who's just made an offensive comment, and it's a one-off, then you feel comfortable speaking to them, you could approach them directly and say, hey, like that behavior was really off, and have that discussion with them, and it might be a chance to for that person to learn that their behavior is not okay. But of course, don't ever feel pressure to do that if you're not comfortable. You can make a formal complaint to your employer about what happened. And again, there might be procedures in place for you to do that. And like, again, as Jane was saying earlier, often it is the boss that has done the harassing. So of course, in that situation, you may need to seek legal advice from us or a union about, how to negotiate that power dynamic and how to go about making a claim. But throughout all this, it's a really good idea to keep records of what's happening. So keep a diary about what was said or done. If you've gotten text messages or emails or Facebook messages or whatever, just keep those because there may be evidence going down the track if you are going to commence a legal claim. And of course, if the incident is severe and it's actually a criminal act such as rape or assault, of course, report it to the police. Yeah, so of course, as I said, your first priority is to keep yourself safe physically and mentally, but those are the kind of steps that you could take. If you do choose to talk to your employer about it, like Johnny was saying, often, especially in small businesses, the workplaces themselves might not have enough training or education to really be able to handle it in a way that, say, a much larger organization where the HR department and a lot of professional advice might have. So that combined with the power imbalance you have being a worker can make it really difficult, and often, as we said, it can be the worker that suffers by getting dismissed because that's the easiest option for the employer to do. But obviously, that's not okay. And then in an ideal world, your employer should investigate the incident. They shouldn't just brush it off or tell you to ignore it. So in investigating the incident, they might speak to you, they might speak to the co-worker, they might speak to any other witnesses that were there to try and figure out what happened. It may, if it's such a small workplace, that would be difficult in practicality to kind of get an independent view. It might be appropriate for them to hire a third party to undertake that investigation. Often, as Jane was saying, it's the worker who's made the complaint that will get their shifts cut or whatever while they're investigating the complaint. That's not okay. Really, they should be standing down the employee who perpetrated the assault or harassment rather than making the worker that complained about it suffer. So they should, conduct that investigation in a fair and transparent way. And once they've taken time to investigate it, decide on a reasonable and appropriate outcome. So that's, the kind of ideal thing. But it's, well, I guess, being in our job here, we don't often hear about ideal outcomes, but often it doesn't go so smoothly. And the worker is aggrieved and wants to figure out what else they can do besides letting their employer deal with the situation. So we'll move on then to, if you do decide that you do want to pursue a legal claim, what are your options? And there's a fair few there, which I will go through. So you may wish to immediately seek legal advice, and that's always a good idea for you to figure out which is the best option. But it may depend as well, like how long ago the conduct took place. So it's good to be aware that in some instances, there's only 21 days to file some claims. So there'd be the General Protections claim in the Fair Work Commission mainly. If that's the best one for you, then it's better to get advice quickly so that that you can lodge that claim. So the first one we'll start to speak to is workers' compensation, and that's often a really good option for people in the immediate aftermath. So you may have heard of workers' compensation. When a worker's on, say, a job site and they fall off a ladder and break their leg, they file a workers' comp claim, and then they get the medical support they need while their leg gets better, and they get income as well. So it's the idea of compensating you for an injury that happens at work. But not everyone knows that it can also, it's also there for people who suffer psychological injuries at work. So things like depression, post-traumatic stress syndrome, anxiety disorders or adjustment disorders. So often with sexual harassment, it's completely obvious, it's a very traumatic thing for people to go through, and it may be that you do need some time off work and some psychological support through your doctor to help you process it. So you can lodge a workers' compensation claim. And with that claim, what happened at work? Work needs to be the significant cause of your psychological injury. So in some instances, people might have a pre-existing mental health condition, and then something happens at work and then it gets much worse. That's okay. It's just that work has to be the significant contributing cause of that worsening. So again, if you're considering that, please seek advice. But briefly, the process is that you see your doctor who fills out a work capacity certificate, which is a bit like an extended sick certificate. That you filed a claim with a claims agent, and then the claims agent, they're a bit like an insurance company, has a maximum of 30 weeks to determine your claim. They'll either accept it or reject it. And you can get interim payments during that time, which means you get the income that you would have received had you been able to continue going to work. So especially for casual workers that might not have any sick leave, it can be a really good option to give you some paid time off work to help you deal with what's happened. So if your claim is accepted, you can get medical expenses paid for. You get those income maintenance payments, so you get income paid to you while you're getting better for up to 2 years. And you can get rehabilitation to help you get back to work. If you cannot return to that workplace, you can also get perhaps some training or get assistance finding a different job instead. So it can be a really good option for people. If your claim's rejected, you can appeal it, and you've only got 1 month to do that, so make sure you get advice quickly. So with regard to the other options you have, as I said earlier, it can depend about how long ago they took place. So currently there's a few different time limits for the different kinds of claims. So if you're currently employed, or you've been dismissed less than 21 days ago, you might consider a general protections claim in the Fair Work Commission or a stop sexual harassment order. The other 2 claims are for claims of sex discrimination or sexual harassment in either the Human Rights Commission or the South Australian Equal Opportunity Commission. So as you can see there on the slide, there's up to 24 months from the last act or last in a series of acts in the Human Rights Commission, and 12 in the South Australian Equal Opportunity Commission. So it's only one factor, but it's just good to be mindful of what the time limits might be so that you can seek advice and pursue which claim is best for you within those timeframes. So we'll just step through some of these options we've just discussed. So the stop sexual harassment order, this is really relevant to you if you're still employed at the place where the conduct happened. So it's filing a claim in the Fair Work Commission, telling the Fair Work Commission that you've been sexually harassed at work, and basically you need help to make it stop. So the Fair Work Commission can organise a conciliation between you and the employer or any relevant party at the employer to help resolve the matter, and can actually then order the employer to take action to stop it from occurring again. So it's really the Fair Work Commission making this kind of preventative, preventing future occurrences of the harassment occurring. So it doesn't result in the payment of compensation, but it can be a good option for people, and it can be a good support as well for, say, a smaller business that might not have the means to hire like a mediator or anyone to help sort out an issue within the workplace. It can be a good thing to go along to the Fair Work Commission and have that mediation. So that's the first thing you can do. Secondly, in the Fair Work Commission, there's something called a general protections claim, and that's really where, as I've said earlier, you have workplace rights, and they're protected by the law. And this is recognising that because you have those protected rights, that an employer cannot take adverse action against you for raising those rights. So it can be things like, inquiring about your level of pay, or talking about your safety at work. It can also be, obviously, being sexually harassed at work, or being discriminated against on the basis of sex, or there's a bunch of other bases as well, like disability, race, etc. But we'll focus on sex discrimination today. So it's a similar process. It involves the first stage is a conciliation, where you'll be with an independent mediator at the Fair Work Commission, the employer on the other side, and you hopefully try and figure out a means to settle the matter. And in this instance, you can claim compensation like damages for economic loss as well as non-economic loss. And if that's not successful, it can go further to court. So again, it's quite a suggest you seek further advice if you're thinking about it. But just remember, if you have been dismissed, so if you've complained at work and then the bosses let you go, just remember you've only got 21 days to put in that claim. It's the same for unfair dismissals, and not many people know about it. It's a very short time frame, so I tell everyone I talk to basically, if you're dismissed, 21 days to get advice, just make sure you get onto it quickly. And yeah, so I mentioned adverse action. I just wanted to go into a bit more about what that means. It's not only getting fired, it's also this idea, what the law says, like injuring an employee in their employment. So it can mean a bunch of things. It might be cutting shifts, it might be changing your hours in a way that doesn't benefit you. It might be missing out on training or promotions. It might be discriminating between, giving someone else opportunities and not yourself, like discriminate against you on that basis, or refusing to hire someone as well. It can be prospective employees as well. So basically, if you feel like you're not being treated fairly at work and you feel like it's because you've made a complaint, good idea to seek advice on it. So, and just to recap again, 21 days if you are dismissed, but you can also put it in this kind of claim if you're still working now as well. Did you have any other further case studies, Jamie, about where people have made a complaint at work? Or
yeah, sure. I can go over a couple of the testimonies that I've received and just kind of some commented on the pages of what an experience was like. One of them was, and this is again just a bit of a content warning because these are real people's experiences. They've given and consented to let me use this testimony. I've taken out everything that can identify anyone. Just wanted to reiterate that. One was, I was continuously harassed by fellow co-workers and managers, making comments about my body, telling me what they wanted to do with me, asking about my sex life and telling me in detail about theirs, making comments about what they thought I'd like sexually, asking me for sex and messaging me on social media platforms to continue the harassment outside of work. At a staff event, my co-worker put his arm around me despite me having to pull away and leave, forcibly moved my head towards him and kissed me in front of other managers and co-workers who laughed it off. When I messaged my manager the next day saying I didn't feel comfortable working with that person anymore, I didn't receive any shifts. So that's a really common theme that we're seeing, where as soon as you kind of speak out about it, your shifts are cut straight away, and then that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's such a common story. Unfortunately, we see a lot of these kind of cases here as well, where like I said, it's just easier for the workplace to deal with it by getting rid of the person who has complained, but it's definitely against the law. So the other two claims that you can have, like I said, is either the Australian Human Rights Commission, which has a 24 time-out limit, or the Equal Opportunity Commission. So those are saying that you've been discriminated against on the basis of your sex or gender. So you've been treated differently at work because you're usually because you're a woman, or you've been sexually harassed at work. So and it is both a similar kind of process in terms of, again, the first stage is a mediation or a conciliation where it's with an independent facilitator who's trying to help both parties come to an agreement to settle the matter. And then if that doesn't succeed, there's means in either jurisdiction to proceed on to a tribunal or a court for then to have the matter heard, like a trial where all the evidence is presented, and then you may be awarded compensation. So it's a lot to go into today about which is better suited to which set of facts or that kind of thing. So it's a good idea to seek advice again if you're considering either of those complaints. But just to draw your attention that those commissions exist and you are able to make those complaints. And as well, very important to remember those time frames. Like we said earlier, it can take people a really long time to process this and to be in a healthy enough state of mind to be able to deal with it again by filing a complaint and detailing what happened, or even talking to someone about it. And that's why the time limits are, up to 2 years from the incident. That the laws, recognizing that it can take people a long time to process it. So again, just keep those in mind and seek further advice from us or a union, or if you'd like to go through that process. You can, of course, do it yourself. There's lots of information as well on the Equal Opportunity Commission website or the Human Rights Commission website about the process and how to go through the process yourself. They both are designed that it's not like you need a lawyer to go there. It is designed to be user-friendly and a way that a worker can make their own complaint. But yeah, it can be a good idea to seek advice about which option is best for you. So just in kind of summary, I guess, just remember your first step, keep yourself safe. Make sure that you're in a safe place, both mentally and physically, away from the harassment. Seek support if you need it from your friends, family, or co-workers. Keep notes or records about what's happening. That can be very important if you do decide to lodge a legal claim, and perhaps seek some advice around what to do next. And just be mindful of those time limits to make legal complaints if you decide that's what you want to do. And just on that, I guess I'd like to say as well, like, not everyone wants to go filing a claim or complaint, and that's completely okay as well. You really have to have your own mental health and well-being first and foremost, and it's not for everyone, and that's completely fine as well. But the main goal, I guess, of today is to let you know that you do have options, and you do have support, and you can call us or your union to have a chat through these things if you want to go down that path. So getting towards the end of our webinar now, I just wanted to talk about how can you create change in your workplace. How can you put measures in place to try and create a healthy environment for yourself and your co-workers? First of all, start the conversation. Talk to your co-workers about it. I'm sure, Jamie, you've talked about people can be friends with their co-workers and work very closely with people, and you might have common concerns about your safety that you might not have had the chance to talk about. So, open the conversation and chat with your co-workers about what you all want to see in your workplace, if there's changes that you can suggest to your bosses. Ask your boss if they do have a policy, and if they don't, encourage them to develop one about what to do if you're sexually harassed at work. Ask them how to report an incident if something happens. Or you might even, there might be a common situation. You can say to them, well, look, what happens if I am here alone at night and someone comes in, like, what do I do in that situation? And make them think about it. Maybe there's ways they can improve the safety of the workplace. Think about being an active bystander. So that's really if you see something happening that you don't think is cool at work, feel empowered to call it out, and stand up for your co-workers as well. Encourage other people to do the same things. That can be really powerful in a workplace as well, where you're all looking out for each other and you're all stamping out that behaviour as it occurs. Keep up to date with initiatives in the industry, and you might consider joining a union as well, which we'll talk a bit more in a second. Did you have any other suggestions, Jamie, around things people can do to
Yeah, you've kind of covered them all.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to have these conversations and talk about it. Find like a buddy or a person you feel safe with communicating within your workplace, whether that's a friend and a co-worker, whether that is a manager that you trust. I think having that person that you know you can fall back on and go to if you have something happen to you is really quite vital. And just know that a lot of people feel quite uncomfortable and they kind of stumble through these conversations in the beginning, but the more you start opening up this dialect and having these conversations, it gets easy with time. So, it can always be like quite uncomfortable for everyone in the beginning, but everyone's in the same boat. And it's all about ensuring that you're safe at work and you feel the agency and the confidence to make sure that you know you're being respected and safe at work.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. It's such a good way to put it. Exactly. It can be really hard to start these things, but the more you talk about it, the more normal it feels. So yeah, get involved in these campaigns. Like Jamie's talked a lot about this new push to stamp out this kind of behaviour in the hospitality industry, and our Equal Opportunity Commissioner Jodine Carney is calling for a review into workplace culture in the hospitality industry. So keep an eye out for that and support that call. Also, the United Workers Union, who represent workers in hospitality, they're supporting that call for a review, and they're actually currently rolling out a survey into all venue management sites in Adelaide, so pubs, hotels, clubs, etc. Kind of again judging and trying to gather data and information about the state of play out there and sexual harassment that's happening in hospitality. So you've got the link there to the survey, but I can send it out to everyone as well afterwards. So obviously, yeah, the survey is confidential, and the same if you were to approach us for advice, no one would ever go approaching your workplace without your consent. So please feel comfortable in that way. And yeah, consider joining the union. So if you're not aware, unions are bodies that represent workers, and we are here for people who aren't a member of a union, but we do say that it's a great idea to join a union to not only have that individual industrial support in the workplace if you need it, also collectively joining a movement that's helping workers and helping to bargain for better conditions in your industry and your workplace. So yeah, check out the unions as well if you like. So we do have some further resources available on our website, the Work Career Centre. We've got some fact sheets here around making a workers' compensation claim, going through a bit of what we've seen here today about what your rights are. We've got a good collection of case studies as well, which is summarising some cases that have actually made it all the way to court, where people who've suffered sexual harassment have won some compensation from the relevant court. So it's interesting to read through those and kind of understand where things are at. And yeah, just the number 1-800-RESPECT there as well. If you do need someone to talk to, they're always there to give you that support if you need. Oh, and we're also having a walk-in legal clinic this Thursday rather. So like I said, there's 3 or 4 lawyers here at the centre, and at any time you can ring us up for a free 30-minute appointment to discuss any issues you might be having at work. But on Thursday, we're going to basically be available all day to take your call or your inquiry. So I'd really encourage you, if you've got any questions about what we've spoken about today and you'd like to have a chat, give us a call on Thursday and we'll be available. And we're holding our first one next year will be on Tuesday, the 17th of January. So there's that option as well. But yeah, if you can't make it on Thursday, then we're always available for you to call and make an appointment to chat with a lawyer and get that free legal advice. So look, I think we're wrapping up the webinar now. So please do follow us on the social medias as well as Not So Hospitable on Instagram. We've got lots of webinars coming up, and we do promote the resources that we're developing as well. So yeah, please keep up to date with what we're doing and check out these resources. And please let us know if there's any topics that you'd like to hear about in the future as well. We're also always looking for new ideas. So yeah, with that, thank you so much for attending this afternoon. I really hope that what you've heard today has not only given you a bit more insight into what workers are empowering themselves in the industry, but also a bit more about what legal rights you or your co-workers may have if they have been sexually harassed at work. So I hope that it's been interesting and informative and you're feeling empowered to yeah, join those conversations and join the movement and really make it a better industry for everyone and future workers as well. So I'd really like to thank Jamie as well. Thank you so much for for joining me here today. And yeah, please feel free to contact either of us if you'd like to continue the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.